Cool. We can go ahead and start off with kind of a intro question. So what qualities do you think all good leaders should have?
I think you need to start with an understanding or empathy, one or the other, for what your employees go through both in work and also outside of work. I'd say the understanding part is more what's the daily, what are the pressures they're under, what's the stressful part, what's maybe the not so stressful part, and then outside there's obviously some context that's going to sneak in. If they've got families at home, if they don't, that kind of changes the dynamic. Also need to understand what's the style. Like I was in a class one time and they were talking about basically golden rule, but flipping it a little bit. Like if you have 10 employees, providing equal access to every single employee is not necessarily necessary. You're going to have some employees who are very independent who don't want to talk to you, and it's stressful if I'm like, we're going to have an hour every week that we talk. That employee wants to be independent, and you let them know that your door's always open, but you're not going to sit there and micromanage them. On the other hand, you're going to have employees that need 20 hours of your time a week, and you have to manage that, but also finding that happy balance to make sure you're empowering them to be getting the answers they need, getting the face time they need, getting if they want to talk personal, they don't want to talk personal. So just understanding the style that you need to be as a leader, because it's not the same for every team.
Okay. Kind of going off that, how do you create and manage a team team culture that kind of balances, work and productivity and, employee satisfaction?
It's tough. So my first management role, I'd say was indirect. I was account manager. I had PMO. I had sales managers I was dealing with, but I had to get like a common goal across, and I had no direct management of them. So then it was just kind of understanding how you build trust within those silos, and then how you brought a little camaraderie, even though they didn't work on the same team, but you needed them to, because ultimately you needed a price, a lead time. You needed to get a yes across the board, figure out what that yes was, maybe move the needle a little bit. So I think taking that and expanding upon that, when you have employees or team members that are dependent upon you not only for productivity within the team, but also potential future career advancements. Same thing, you build trust, you build understanding, you try to kind of build a portfolio of, you want some experience, you want some folks who want to be within their roles for a few years. That doesn't necessarily have to be lifetime, but you want some knowledge, some pillars of knowledge and some historical references, but you also want to bring some youthfulness and some new ideas within the team. So you just kind of navigate that, and it's gonna ebb and flow. You're gonna end up losing some folks due to retirement. Mm-hmm. But I'd say build trust. That helps you. It helps you on the empathy part, because you can turn around and understand where you can apply pressure and when to apply pressure. And then an understanding of the overall business, so that you're not overstressing folks, and you've got that right balance of they're maximizing their potential, but you're not just burning them out. Mm-hmm. But I think if you get a nice mix of perspectives, it helps drive everybody further. And having a good team culture that's open, transparent. Everybody doesn't have to like each other. I'm not going to go full Deion Sanders where everyone could potentially hate each other. But if they understand that there's a common goal, common objective, then it kind of takes some of that. A little competition's good. So I don't know. It depends on what you're trying to do. But in general, I think a good culture, a nice balance of culture and talent will overcome just pure talent any day of the week.
Awesome. I definitely agree with that. So what approaches do you take to identify a potential leader, within the team or maybe adjacent to your team, and kind of assist with their growth, where that goes, any kind of direction?
I think you start off like you do in any role. You're coming into a team as a leader typically, or at least in my experience, I'm coming in and I'm probably the newest member of the team. So you have to start passive. most of the folks that I interview for like sales manager roles, they present a 30, 60, 90. And if they have anything in their 30-day that's not focused on understanding the team, understanding team dynamics, and getting to know their core team and core, I call them core customers, then they don't really have a full understanding of what it's going to take to build that foundation and then build upon that and then focus on the external factors. So you come in, you listen to, you see who kind of clings to who, and I say that in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And there's usually natural leaders that it's not a hierarchical, this is a senior DSE and this is a lower DSE. There are certain people that people want to talk to, whether it's personal, professional, they vent to, and you kind of just keep an eye out for that, ear out for that, and then you also listen around the plant of which teams respect which members, which ones are getting griped about. Sometimes that's well-deserved, sometimes it's not, but I'd say you got to take a kind of multi-angled approach to understanding, who is acting the right way and getting that passive leadership, kind of the tip of the hat from their peers.
Okay. And I know maybe it's more old school, or leaders should be coming in and making a change right away, not to necessarily present themselves, but say you're not afraid, we want to change things up, kind of change people's perspective. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
I think you got to understand what to change. Like I came into the role, I think within the first week I had moved Jonathan Craig over, basically our IT guy underneath of basically our program strategy lead in AJ, and it was twofold. One, he wasn't getting enough managerial time. I mean, by the time you work through the responsibilities of a product line manager, IT typically is not going to be on the top of that list unless you have a major catastrophic issue. In talking with him, I think he was feeling that as well. And then other product lines I've worked in, they had that similar structure. I've seen the success. I've seen the opportunity for, basically localized management. Typically they're managing 1 or 2 people, not 10. So it's a nice growth path for that role. And there's direct alignment. So it allowed me to come in, change the team a little bit, but you're not all of a sudden rocking the boat. Now there are other jobs where you have to turn around and rock the boat. People aren't happy with the fact that we're coming in. I would have loved to have turned around and said 3 days a week, but without a sales manager, it kind of changes that dynamic. So you kind of have to understand which levers to push, because you can, if you're too abrupt, you can alienate people. I'm not Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And it depends what industry you're in too. You look at some of the IT industry, much faster pace, much quicker turn. You've got a different set of employees typically, and I say that when you start looking through your Gen Z, millennial, I think there's a different appetite within your different age ranges, or your different layers of folks. It's not to bucketize them, it's just in general. I mean, you've got a group of folks who've been doing something for 60 years, all of a sudden you rock the boat. You got to have a lot of evidence behind it, and it's tougher, and you almost have to have more evidence to turn around and do a 90-degree turn. I'd say in our industry, since everything's so slow burning and long on the tooth, you're typically not turning around and spiking the football and saying, hey, we're turning this over, we're going to move across the street, and we're going to burn this plant down and start another one.
Okay, awesome. So what do you look for in potential employees when interviewing, outside of technical knowledge?
Self-awareness. Typically, a good employee is going to understand how they fit in to the overall system. And I say that the aptitude is kind of one of those, I expect that box to be checked. If it's not checked, you can't overcome that, or you try to find another avenue. For us, obviously COE is typically a feeder role. So we've interviewed folks in the past that just don't quite have that enough, or it would be a longer stretch for them, but we think personality-wise, everything else, that give them 3 years of understanding LVA, getting to know the players, getting to know the systems, then they'd be a good DSE. You try to find other avenues, but I think coming in and folks who have the chops and then have a self-awareness of, okay, there are others on my team, my customers are here and here, and not only is it responding to sales, it's making sure you have enough information for your COEs and just where they fit in the overall dynamic of their role. I think that's very, very important. And also within a team. You can't have all type A's that are going to cut each other's throats. So you try to mix and match in that as well. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, for me, it's usually a feel, and I know that's not a scientific thing, but I mean, you can understand, going back to that culture element, you can kind of understand who's going to play well within the team. And it's not that everyone has to play well within the team, but you need to understand the dynamics of that specific team. You talked about disruption. If you have a team that needs maybe a disruptor or kind of a noisier member, then that might be the right role for that. If you have a bunch of those already, or the team needs some stability, then you'd be looking for something else.
Okay. So when you're in that interview, is that feel come from just how they're answering the questions, or are there kind of pointed questions you kind of dig in to kind of see how they react or respond to certain situations?
It's response to situations. Like we've got those Lominger questions that are the world's best questions.
Yes.
If someone sits down and turns around and told me the first time they did something was the best ever and they didn't learn anything from it, that's usually my first sign that they either don't have a self-awareness that there could always be some level of improvement, even if it was, a home run. There's always some lesson learned, or like, I could have approached this differently, or it would have been easier on me if I'd printed this out and shown up with it, and then, the power outage wouldn't have occurred. I think people, that kind of goes back to that self-awareness, people understanding what you're trying to get out of the interview questions too, and not just think, okay, going back to my college days, I failed a class and then I went and studied more and I did better. It's like having that being able to understand that there's always a better way to do this, or there's a different approach, because there's not a one-size-fits-all, especially in a team environment. The DSEs are a team. They have to be a team. Otherwise, someone goes on vacation, you're losing a whole region. So, like I said, it comes down to specific. If I'm hiring for a sales manager, it's a little bit different. Like, I want someone who's probably a little more independent. They need to be a team player, because that's my right-hand person, and I'm talking to that person way more than they probably have ever been. It's a partnership as far as orders and everything else, whereas the DSC team need to be independent, but you're part of a bigger team. So I don't know if that answered the question very well, but it really depends on the role and kind of, like I said, if they start answering some questions and you start going down that rabbit hole, then you dig in a little more to really understand. Do they understand how to approach problems, not just
it's the process.
Not just the script. When the script disappears, do they?
Agreed. And I think that's also, if you go, I had a perfect project, like, okay, how much did you waste too much time? Did you not involve enough people in your project? Because nothing should be perfect when you release it, because then you spend too much time on it. It's just the cost, or the cost was too high.
Or you spent way too much money because you just graduated from engineering school and you never talked about finance.
There's got to be definitely got to be a medium there.